You know, the first time I ever walked into a public library to steal Michael Jackson's Thriller album. I was 14 years old, and yes, there was a girl. And the pact that I made with the girl, as well as the devil, is that if I get this album for her, she would lower her barricades. I didn't have any money, so my friends recommended that I go up to the free bookshop on top of the hill and steal one. So I wandered into Yorkwood's public library with an empty plastic Price Chopper's bag in my hand. And I approached the front desk, and there was this kindly old woman with a shock of curly white hair, and she looked down at the bag, and she looked back up at me, and she said, "Can I help you, son?" And I said, "I'm looking for Michael Jackson." And she immediately knew why I was there. She had seen this before. And she said, in this exaggerated way, "Oh, I am so sorry, but the album looks like it's been signed out already." And she asked me if I would follow her up to the second floor where the music section was. And I did, a little bit distraught. And as I went up to the second floor, I passed all of these stacks. And they were full of so many books, and I'd never seen these many books before. Entire sections devoted to science and philosophy and literature. There was even a poetry section where for many years later, I would sit there and watch beautiful young women with knitted berets flipping through the works of Robert Frost and Walt Whitman and Rainer Maria Rilke. She led me to the music section, gave me the book, and it was a volume on the contemporary history of American music. And there were pictures of some of the great musicians, Nina Simone, Miles Davis, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, that I would end up coming to appreciate much later in my life. And I remember so clearly walking with that book in my hand, and I could literally feel the grip of this seductress, this young girl I had a crush on, loosening its hold on me. For the first of many times in my life, a book helped me overcome a broken heart. I grew up in the Jane and Finch projects, and back then, in the 80s, the Jane and Finch projects was the Canadian equivalent of Chicago's South Side and LA's South Central. It wasn't easy growing up there, and if you wanted to ever get out, often what you had to do is lead some kind of double life, and I led one of those. In the projects, I did a lot of things that I knew were wrong and that I later would regret. In my other life, I was a star student in school, won all kinds of awards, became valedictorian of my graduating class. My classmates knew nothing about the kind of life I lived back home, and my neighbors knew nothing about my achievements in school. To this very day, I'm very confounded by how and why I led that double life. But I did know one thing, that in both places, what I wanted was the sense of belonging. I felt that if I was the smartest, funniest, most ambitious student, everyone, including my teachers, would admire me, and I'd be liked. Back in the projects, if I just did what all of the older boys dared me to do, then there'd be respect. There's another place that had a profound effect on my adolescence. The same year I went to steal Thriller, I also went to look for a job to help my mother supplement her income. My mother worked 2, sometimes 3 menial jobs, one of which was to pick worms in a golf course, which is the kind of job that was primarily given to immigrants. And even with the monthly social assistance checks, we could barely get by. So I found a place called Pizza Hut that ended up hiring me as a dishwasher. And there, I learned a number of things. One of the things that I learned was that you literally needed a chisel to scrape off all of the dry pasta and cheese from the lasagna bowls. Another thing I learned was that I love the intensity and camaraderie of the kitchen, which may explain why I spent the rest of my life in this business. Third, and most importantly, I learned about the role of family and food. You see, what happened was every single Saturday, the families would all gather there and they would eat together. And my family never did that, whether it was at home or elsewhere. And I loved watching these families arguing, fighting, cajoling, laughing, mostly laughing, around a table of steaming hot food. To this day, folks, Sunday is my favorite day in the restaurants, my restaurants. I love going there just to watch families eating together. One of my fondest childhood memories is of my father driving up in his borrowed car when he came to visit. The three of us would pile in, and he would take us on these drives, but they weren't to Marineland or to Wonderland. They were to the local supermarket. And my brother and sister and I would be racing down these aisles. We knew exactly where to go, picking up things and throwing them all in the cart because he just let us do that. And we knew exactly what it was that was going in there. It was Pop-Tarts, and it was Cheetos, and it was more ice cream than could possibly fit into our freezer. These were happy times. In my house, food was scarce. And when we did have food, it wasn't good for us. Kraft macaroni and cheese, Swanson's frozen dinners, Chef Boyardee beefaroni. I'll tell you the truth, Chef Boyardee was a close friend of the family's. He was in our kitchen a lot, especially when he was on sale. But one thing that they failed to tell me was that he wasn't real, that it was genetically modified. When things got really bad, my friends and I would go to the Jane and Finch Mall, and my friends would go and steal sneakers, right? But I went to steal food. Usually toward the end of the month when the government checks weren't coming in. When you're young and you're hanging out with the boys in the hood, fruits and vegetables are not cool, okay? So there they were, meeting me in the back, and they'd be taking out the latest Air Jordans or the latest Adidas from their jackets, and I didn't have it in me at all to be pulling out like bunches of bananas and zucchinis and stuff like that. So what did I steal? I stole the things that I knew. I stole the things that I saw in the commercials, the stuff that we ate at home, stuff that weren't good for us. And it was also tough. Bread is healthy. But could you imagine, like trying to walk out with a baguette from the Price Chopper? But you know what? Stealing the stuff that wasn't good for us was okay. And the reason why is because my friends were all watching the same commercials as I was. Sugary boxes of cereal like Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms, right? That's the kind of stuff. Chef Boyardee, that was cool. I think to myself, if there was somebody who had taught me at that time how to create a healthy meal, somebody who could say, you use these fresh ingredients and you can cobble together a nutritious meal, then I'll tell you what I had to steal because I did have to. The choices would have been different. I would have probably stolen a packet of seeds and taken this home and planted some tomatoes in my living room. My sister has diabetes. My younger brother has suffered from stomach and digestive ailments his whole entire life, in and out of the hospital. I blame this on the lack of a nutritious diet that we ate when we were children. I want to tell you that living that kind of life is not the kind of life that any 11, 12-year-old child should live. So, here are the stats. 1 in every 10 households in Canada suffer from not knowing where they're going to get their next bag of groceries or their next meal from. 41% of 8th graders skip breakfast. I still skip breakfast. I don't even know what breakfast looks like anymore. But I skip it because back when I was a child, we were rationing just so that we were safe towards the end of the month. And 50% of the children who live under the poverty line in Ontario live right here in the GTA. Child poverty is the greatest barrier to safe and nutritious food. Jane and Finch, the numbers are even grimmer. There, what you have is 75% of households that suffer from some form of food insecurity. You know what food insecurity was back in the day for me? Because that's a polite word of calling this, opening up the fridge and looking up and saying to your younger brother and sister, damn, there's no more food in the fridge. And the check hadn't come. Jane and Finch, food insecurity is massively prevalent. Half of the families will tell you that they can't afford to buy their children healthy food. So my journey began. As I grew older, my life branched out into 3 parallel kind of universes. The first one is I continued to be a restaurateur. I loved, in the end, I hated the job. It's a lot of hours. But I loved watching families coming together in my space and sharing food together. Number 2, I became a writer, an award-winning writer. And anytime I have the opportunity, I always like to share that with people. And I was heavily influenced by the great German poet Rainer Maria Rilke. And he wrote something that really resonated with me. He wrote that the only true journey is the journey within. And although it did resonate with me, I believe that to be half the truth. Because the third thing that I did was actively engage in activism and advocacy, especially for food literacy for children. I wanted to engage with the world, and that's the other half that Rilke didn't mention. I wanted to help young children with the hope and with the imaginings that I was helped when I was a child as well. And I wanted to take all of these things together. And after the success of my first Japanese restaurant, it was very successful, a modern Japanese sushi bar in downtown Toronto, I decided that I wanted to merge these 3 things and help children, teach children how to make sushi, and use that as a platform to really talk about the larger issues around food literacy. And I call that sushi-making for the soul. And in sushi-making for the soul, what I do is I walk into the classrooms and the community centers and into the libraries, and I love watching these little kids smushing rice and rolling seaweed around vegetables and seafood. But it offers me an opportunity to really discuss with them, to dialogue with them. What does food literacy mean to you? Food literacy is not merely about trying to balance a healthy diet according to the Canada Food Guide. That's what I've learned from these kids. Food literacy, at the heart of it, is how industrialization and commercial greed undermines our primal relationship to the earth's bounty. How and why GMOs are created and subsidized to be made more affordable than food that we get from nature itself. Those are the things that we discuss while engaging in the smooshing and the rolling of rice. In the spring of 2013, I held the first live feed sushi making class with children from Toronto and children from Kampala, Uganda over the internet. With the help of Kids Canada, these children connected across social, economic, culinary barriers. And they're kids, they're open, they're willing to do what other kids are willing to do. And they made something in Uganda that was completely foreign to them. They don't eat things raw over there. But the most important thing is that these kids came together over the internet and they joined hands. And they shared an understanding and the profound beauty of knowing that food is that thing that generates community. That like love, food is an interaction between sharing and giving and compassionate taking. Next year, I will be conducting the world's largest sushi making class over the internet. I'll be connecting children from every single continent, including Antarctica and the Arctic Circle, and they will be gathered around one table. And we'll be making sushi together. And we'll be dialoguing about food literacy. And we'll be telling everybody that it's important that the nourishment of the mind and the nourishment of the body is equal and must be taught so like that in every classroom, in every school around the world. Kids will come from all over a 12-hour cycle. And we're going to reach them across the internet and say to them, we understand your journey. We understand that you don't need to go and steal food for your younger brother and sister when you're 10 years old. And so what we're doing is we're asking you to come on out across the food chain, up and down the food ladder, across barriers that are meant to divide us. Come and help set this table for these children. Children whose greatest legacy, all of them, is to demand that we be better adults, that we be better human beings. They are waiting at that table to be served by us. If there's one thing that I've learned from children, it's this, that life is not a philosophy. Life is a mission. It's movement. It's not inertia. It's a verb, not a noun. So as a writer, I love all kinds of words, but I love action words greater than thing words. I love words that make the heart pump and has your mind reaching for the stars. A words, like astonish and accomplish. C words, like connect, community. D words like dream, discover. And R words like rethink, reboot, and if necessary, revolt. I give you the immortal call to action by my favorite poet, Rilke. Yes, the springtimes needed you. Often a star was waiting for you to notice it. A wave rolled toward you out of the distant past. Or as you walked under an open window, a violin yielded itself to your hearing. All this was mission. Could you accomplish it? I think you can. And I think you can help me set that table next year. Thank you.